I have a mold problem. It's hard to talk about and embarrassing to admit. And I'm not talking about like the fungus algae kind of mold. I'm talking resin molds. In case you thought I was exaggerating, here they are. I've got them tucked in there about as tight as I can. And if I were to take them out and line the floor with my molds, it's possible they'd take up about half of the shed floor. And what's worse, I want more. Hey everyone, it's Mona here at Craft Clutch, and today we are going to talk resin molds. Last time we talked about 6 resin tips, and you can find that right here if you want to review it. If you're new to resin, or even if you've gotten started but you've got some issues, I've got some tips there that might be very helpful. And don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing, because I'm going to do more of these resin talks. And if you have any questions at all about resin, be sure to leave that in the comments below so that I can cover it next time. So you've mixed your resin and you want to make something awesome. So unless you're going to free-form something, which we'll talk about later, you are going to want to have a mold. And you can't just use any mold for resin because resin won't release from everything. You can buy pre-made molds or you can make your own. There are molds specifically made for resin and some that are not. And you can use both, but you gotta kind of use them differently. So let's talk molds. Let's first talk about plastic molds. All plastics are not made alike. Resin doesn't want to stick to some plastics, but it refuses to let go of others. I won't get into the science behind it because I don't know it. I just want my resin to release. So the molds that are made for resin are like this. They look like this. They're a thicker, different kind of plastic. And when I look up the name, I'm going to have it right here. That's what these are. You know, they had light switch covers, and I think they're still available, and they're great molds. They work great. You can pour the resin in, allow it to cure, and it will pop out. And really, isn't that what we're looking for? It doesn't necessarily pop out super easy. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. If you ever run into any trouble getting the resin to release from your mold, then all you have to do is pop it into like the freezer for 10 minutes and it'll pop right out. That's after it's cured, not while it's curing. Of course, if you explore plastic molds, you're gonna find a lot of cool molds that are made for candy. And like I have this heart one was my favorite. I just love the shape of it. I used it on a couple of different projects that were not resin related. I used it with I think it was like a salt clay. I also used it to put embroidery string in there and to kind of just use it as a form. And that's one of my most popular posts over on my website. And I'll have that link down in the description below if you want to see it. It turned out really pretty, but that was not resin related. So let's talk about resin and these things. If you use a mold release, you can get away with using these plastic molds. You can use common household items as a mold release. One would be petroleum jelly and the other would be mineral oil. Both of them will allow your resin to release from plastic molds. But you have to make sure that you really get the surface covered, not pooling in there, but covered so that you didn't miss a spot, because that one spot is where it's gonna stick. And just so you know, both can be messy, but they definitely do work. When I used this mold, I did a shark pen topper and I used mineral oil. And I used petroleum jelly for the resin pigment heart. Both of them work great. You just need to know it's gonna be messy and you just gotta make sure you get it everywhere. And out of the two, I definitely prefer the petroleum jelly. I also use the petroleum jelly as the mold release for the inner bucket on my Colossal Cupcake lamp. If you have not seen that one, definitely check it out, because that is one of my most favorite projects ever. They also sell mold release, which works too, but I kind of feel like petroleum jelly works better. I did try the mold release on some thin hearts that I had done in plastic, and they didn't want to budge when it cured, so I popped it into the freezer. I may have forgotten about them. They might have been in there for like an hour or so and gotten a little brittle. When I popped them out, they did pop out, but they broke. So that's on me. And I kind of think they probably would have popped out okay if I hadn't left them in there quite that long. I've also heard Dawn dish soap, but I haven't tried that. But I kind of feel like that'd be like super easy to clean. Let's move on to silicone molds. Silicone molds are my favorite, my absolute favorite, hands down. the best in my opinion. They're the easiest to work with, and now they come in great shapes, sizes, like anything. You can find just about anything. Your project will easily release. You're not going to need any additional mold release to get it out. It will just pop right out. Back in the day, they were generally made for baking, and I still use molds that are made for baking for resin. But just know that if you're using it for resin, do not use it for baking. Do not cross that line. Keep one for the craft room and one for the kitchen if you're wanting to bake with that particular mold. I don't really have a problem with that because, let's be honest, once I started working with resin, like my baking kind of went out the window. I still do it, just not nearly as often as I used to. But as wonderful as resin molds are, they will not last forever. Epoxy resin is corrosive, and eventually it's going to degrade and wear down your resin mold. So it's not going to last forever. Just know that. Love it and use it while you can. It's normal, it's to be expected, and some just seem to wear out faster than others. There's a whole science and chemical reaction thing going on that I can't even begin to explain. So let's just accept it. That's the way it is. Just like your tires on your car wear out, or your oven wears out, or anything will wear out, your molds are going to wear out too. And if you're wondering how they wear out, sometimes you'll see it starting to discolor, and you'll be able to tell that it's starting to wear out. Otherwise, sometimes you might take your piece out, like the coaster mold that I use all the time. Eventually, like I'll be taking a coaster out and it will stick and it will just rip the mold. That's what happens. It sucks. What can you do? And sometimes also with the coaster molds, it'll start out flat, but over time, you know, probably from the heat of the resin curing or whatever's going on, like the bottom might not be flat anymore. You might get like this lump in there. So you'll just know that your mold is heading toward the end of its life. So the mold that I have used most often is, obviously, if you've watched my channel at all, is the coaster mold. And I cannot believe I don't have one available right now to hold up. I used to do every Friday, I used to do another coaster Friday, and it was another coaster every Friday. They have so many cool molds out now that they didn't have before, but even still, you don't have to limit yourself to what they make for resin. I mentioned before the cupcake lamp that I made. Do you remember this was for baking, like a big old cake that was shaped as a cupcake? Well, I took it and I created a lamp out of it, out of resin. So if you think outside of the box, like the possibilities are just endless. And of course, my gingerbread house mold, also always a favorite, because that one, I've done 3 different versions. I did one for Easter, I turned it into a zombie house, and then I did a Christmas one. So I have plans for many, many years in my head to do a summer one. Eventually I'm gonna do it. I really want to do it. Eventually I'm going to make it happen. And it's a shame. It's a shame to use a mold only once, so why not repurpose it for different holidays or different things? Why not? So what about cleaning silicone molds? Well, you don't really have to do a whole lot because the resin will just release from the silicone. If you happen to get it where it's stuck on there, like I still have it from years ago, still stuck on the edge of this one. But it's not getting in the way, so I don't even do it. If I wanted to, all I would have to do is pick it off and it would come right off. But I got other things to do. Now, sometimes if you actually paint directly on the mold, you might have some paint still stuck on there. Like perhaps if it was on the edge of the coaster or something where it didn't catch with the resin. And that's no big deal. It scrapes right off, peels right off, just like the resin does. Just do it with your fingernail. So they do get dusty. Maybe you have a little glitter left in there from your last project, or maybe a stray piece of cat fur, hair off your head, who knows. Easy, easy, easy. Take a piece of tape and just run it along the inside of your mold. It will pick up all that stray debris and get it right out of the way. I'm a big fan of packing tape. So what about making your own molds or freeform? That is no problem because there are silicone products available that will allow you to make your own molds. I've used 2 different kinds. I've used one in putty form and one in liquid form, and both of them worked really well. And they're both the same, where there's a part A and a part B. You mix them together, the chemical reaction happens, magic happens, and you have silicone. So for the putty one, you just mix the two parts together and then you press in whatever object that you want to mold right into it. Like I did a goldfish. I did an Oreo cookie. I did a mini Reese's Pieces cup. Those are just things that I used. You could mold the bottom of a jar if you wanted an imprint to make like a bowl or something. You could do something of that nature too. And the liquid stuff pours, so there's all kinds of things that you can make with that. And there's a wealth of knowledge out there of people that are mold making experts. I'm not a mold making expert, but I do occasionally like to make a mold. And I have done two that I've really enjoyed. I made this bowl mold, which I do have a video of that if you need it. Oh look, there's a piece of cat hair right there. So you put your resin in and then you put this in and then you hold it down and it will create a bowl for you. I made a few of them. I will have those linked down in the description below in case you're interested to see that. And I do have a video on how I made the mold. And I made it using a Dollar Tree bowl. That's what this is. And then I have this one, which I made out of a creme brulee dish. And I've made a couple of different bowls out of it, and they're kind of a fun bowl just to be able to throw stuff into. You're limited only by your imagination. So I have seen people make molds out of caulk. I tried that once, silicone caulk. Did not work for me, so I never tried it again. But that's an option that's out there. You just will have to find that information somewhere else. So way back when, I had a conversation with one of my subscribers, Kate, and she had told me about Silly Putty being an option for a mold because it will release. I had no idea. So I had to try it, and I did, and it was perfect to create a free form mold. I used it around the wings of my dragonfly art, and I also used it to make my egg coasters, which again, those are some of my favorite too. And it worked like a charm, released no problem. So those are the different molds. You can make them yourself, you can buy them. I will have a bunch of different stuff linked so that you can find it. I will have the videos linked that I refer to in here. I will have some of the products linked so you can find those as well. But the main thing is just try it. Just try it. If you're new to resin, just try it. Buy a coaster mold or some basic mold. Again, I would recommend silicone, and just go to town, try it. You can't go wrong. And again, if you haven't, go check out my 6 tips for epoxy resin if you are new to resin, and hopefully that will help you out. It'll take some of the guesswork out of it beforehand, or talk to you about things that maybe you hadn't thought of. So thanks guys for being here. I will definitely see you next time. Remember, life's too short not to shimmer, so grab your glue gun and your glitter. Stay safe. Bye.